Good afternoon, gardeners. It's Sunday, June 20th, and it has been a miserable season this year for tomatoes. Here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina, we've received almost 9 inches of rain this month alone, and now it's so windy out because Tropical Storm Claudette is about to hit us and give us even more rain that we don't need. You can see we're probably in a sustained 35-mile-an-hour wind right now. So I'm going to take you through the garden, and I'm going to harvest the tomatoes that I can right now before the storm comes in and wipes whatever I have left out. And hopefully in the process, I'll be able to show you the best tomato varieties for growing in these miserable, hot, humid, wet conditions that I live in. As I mentioned, where I live, we have miserable conditions for growing tomatoes in. We have so many problems with pest and disease. And before I want to show you the good performers in my climate, I want to show you the worst of the worst. Here I have the Brandywine yellow tomato plant, the Brandywine pink sudeth tomato plant, and the Cherokee purple tomato plant right here. And as you can see, all three of these plants have not only stingy yields, but they're also covered in disease. The reason why I grow these plants is because they taste so good that it's generally worth putting up with dealing with their stingy production and terrible disease problems because of the taste. However, my goal is to find hybridized versions of these heirloom plants that have very similar or the same taste, but with better production and better disease resistance. And I think I'm really close to that. So now that you've gotten to look at these plants and you see how terrible the production is and how terrible the disease coverage is on all of these plants, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you the ones in my climate that look to be very promising performers that are performing much better than these old heirlooms. And as a quick reminder right here, this is my Brandywine pink sudeth plant. You can see it has a stingy to mild yield of medium-sized tomatoes on the plant. It also has its very first tomato in the back there that is just starting to turn a little bit pink. I have not yet harvested any tomatoes off this plant. But just look at these two Chef's Choice pink plants by comparison. I've already harvested 2 monster tomatoes off these plants. And the first thing that you'll notice is the size is much larger than the Brandywine pink, and they're also maturing much more quickly, much earlier than the Brandywine pink. And I'm not sure if Brandywine pink is a parent to this cross, but I'm fairly certain it is because they taste almost exactly the same. So I'm going to go ahead and harvest the first harvest some of these tomatoes. This will be my 3rd tomato off this plant, and it's a really nice size, probably a solid 12 ounce. And wow, there are just some really nice tomatoes all over these 2 plants. Let's try to take you in for a little bit of a closer look here. Try to pick this one right here. It's a very nice looking tomato, if I do say so myself. Has a little bit of a split in it. Another beauty. And these are large tomatoes, probably bordering on a pound or so. There's a little bit of damage here on the bottom of this one, so they are prone to some cracking. And here you can see my basket full of Chef's Choice pink. There are several pounds of tomatoes in that basket alone. A variety that's really blowing my mind this year is the Big Beef hybrid. Not only is it setting huge clusters of large fruit that seem to never crack no matter how hard it rains, but the plant is virtually disease-free, which is absurd because all of my other plants have some element of disease to them. And I'm just so impressed by this plant that if this fruit tastes good at all, this is an absolute must-grow here in the humid South. I've been staring at these tomato clusters for weeks, and I just can't wait to cut them off. Oh, look at this. This is just a picture-perfect, smooth, flat tomato. Very impressed with the uniformity of all these tomatoes despite the very heavy rain. And those are some beautiful Big Beef tomatoes right there. The next variety that's really impressing me is surprisingly an heirloom, and that is an old heirloom variety called white Tomesol. This variety actually came to me in the way of a free packet of seed from Baker Creek, and as you can see, it's completely loaded with fruit, and I'm really impressed by the production. I'm also impressed by the overall lack of disease on the plant. It did have some, and I had to remove the lower leaves because they were starting to get a little bit of blight. So after removing them though, the top half of the plant looks really good, and it looks like it has nice 8-ounce fruits. It's a little tough to tell when it's ripe, but this appears to be about getting close to ripe. Now I will say that a bunch of these tomatoes did suffer in the wet weather and they wound up becoming waterlogged, and I had to throw them out. And you can see there's some marring on this one right here. It's a little bit rotten. So it does have a little bit of problems in the rain. However, it is split resistant, and I'm pretty happy overall with the production of these wonderful tomatoes. The next plant I want to show you is another hybridized version of the Brandywine Pink Sudduth, and it's absolutely blowing my mind, and that is the big Brandy plant that you see right here. Now, as I mentioned before, I love the Brandywine Pink Sudduth tomato. It's one of my absolute favorites, but the plant itself is a nightmare thanks to its terrible stingy yields and disease problems. I've been growing the Burpee Brandy Boy hybrid for about 5 years now because it's an improvement on the Brandywine Pink. However, I think this is an even bigger improvement because the yields on this thing are blowing my mind. And it's almost hard for me to show you because of how dense the foliage is on this plant. So I'm just going to pick them one by one and just look at the size of these tomatoes. They're enormous. That's well over a pound. I'm just so impressed by this big Brandy hybrid. Just look at the craziness here. That all came off of that one plant. Each tomato looks to be well over 1 pound, and while it does seem to have a little bit of cracking, just like the Brandywine Pink Sudduth does, overall I'm pretty happy with the uniformity of the tomatoes. My dwarf tomato project and determinate tomato bed is incredibly productive, but the plants are starting to become overwhelmed with disease. However, if you look inside the tomato bed, you will find some plants that have very little disease compared to all the rest of the others, and those are the Rosa tomatoes. Now, I'm growing this variety because it was very popular on Haas Tools' channel in Georgia, so I figured if it does well for them there, it should do well for me here. And right off the bat, the thing that I'm really noticing is the absolutely perfect shape, no splitting, no cracking at all, and very large, probably 8 to 16 ounce fruits that typically form. All of them are picture perfect, and they don't seem to be being attacked by pests at all. And I hope that's not because they don't taste good. I hope that's just because they're so crack resistant that the pests just don't have an entry point. And the last tomato I want to showcase for you today is the Arkansas Traveler tomato, which is also an heirloom tomato. I grew this last year with great success. It's one of the few non-cherry tomatoes that will set fruit all summer long here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina in our hot, miserable temperatures. And the amazing thing, again, these plants are virtually disease-free, and they set a ton of fruit. They're not the largest fruits, but they're probably nice 6 ounce fruits right here. They are really nice mid-sized slicing tomatoes. And again, because we have such issues with temperatures here, we will take any tomatoes we can get in the middle of the summer. And all things considered, this is pretty nice. I could sit here and tell you all day about all of these great producing varieties that I have in front of me, but then we'd be here all day, so I need to call it at some point. But all of my Chef's Choice, the Chef's Choice Bicolor, the Chef's Choice Red, the Chef's Choice Purple, man, look at that Chef's Choice Purple, just crazy fruit production, and the Chef's Choice Green are all showing great yields, good resistance to disease, and mostly decent resistance to splitting. And as always, the Dwarf Tomato Project plants have absolutely incredible production. I will say they mostly all tend to suffer from susceptibility to disease, and I think that's just because they're all inbred in their quest to only deliver open pollinated seed. So as a result, they tend to not do great when it comes to disease pressure, and they also seem to be very susceptible to splitting due to rain. So take this Tasmanian chocolate, for instance. See, it has a lot of bad spots in it, and that just seems to be pretty commonplace with these Dwarf Tomato Project plants. When you get stuck in a rainy cycle, they tend to take heavy losses, which is a shame because the flavor on pretty much all of these are just fantastic. Some of you asked for an update on my cucumbers, and they are doing fantastic as well. I'm growing Bite Alpha again, which are the 3 smooth cucumbers on the right. The production is just incredible. And then next to them, the other 3 large ones are called China Jade. Both varieties are parthenocarpic, so they set fruit without pollination, and they all grow on really healthy plants. That right there is the China Jade plant. I get usually 2 cucumbers off of these 2 plants right here every single day. And then these are my Bite Alpha cucumber plants. They give me probably 2 cucumbers a day as well. The Bite Alpha are the best tasting cucumbers I've ever tasted. The China Jade aren't bad, but they're not as crisp and sweet. These Bite Alphas are just the best. It was my original intent to taste test these varieties, but I'm just having a terrible year this year with all of the horrible rains, and nothing's coming out correctly or ripening correctly, and everything is just waterlogged. So it really wouldn't be fair to taste test these and give you an accurate gauge of flavor. Instead, I just want you to know of the production and the uniformity. Again, these right here are the Chef's Choice Pink. These are the Big Beef. These are the White Tomesol. These are the Big Brandy. These are the Bella Rosa, and these are the Arkansas Traveler. And everything that you see over there in that basket is a mix of all of my other varieties in my garden. However, I will let you know that a little over a week ago, I did have one of my Chef's Choice Pink tomatoes, and it was perfectly ripe, and it was honestly one of the best, if not the best tomatoes I've ever had. It was exactly the same as a Brandywine Pink Sudeth. So I will say the Chef's Choice Pink is just as good as Brandywine Sudeth and has larger tomatoes, they're earlier and better yields. Now, I did say I didn't want to taste test anything, but I do really want to try this Big Beef on camera because it does seem like it actually is ripe. And I want to compare it to this Brandywine Yellow because Brandywine Yellow has been my favorite tomato practically ever. It's just amazing in flavor, and it's why I go through the terrible trouble of growing it because it's a stingy plant. I also want to compare it to Dwarf Emerald Giant, which is one of the most acidic tomatoes I've ever had. These are both packed with flavor. So how will a hybrid like Big Beef stand up? You can see it is not quite as meaty as the heirlooms, and that's to be expected. But I just have to taste this Brandywine Yellow. And it's lacking the flavor that it typically does because it's been such a horrible wet year. It's a little watered down, but it's still very good. It's a very balanced tomato with a moderate acidity. Now this Dwarf Emerald Giant, on the other hand, wow. This has been sitting on my counter for a few days, and this is so acidic, it's burning my fingers where I have a couple of cuts in them. Ooh, man, that tomato has a lot of bite to it. So much flavor. And I want to see how this Big Beef holds up. And you can definitely tell it's been a wet year. It is watered down. It's not quite where it should be. However, I can tell this is a very smooth and balanced tomato. It doesn't have nearly the acid bite that the Dwarf Emerald Giant does, but overall, it's still a good tomato. And obviously the yields are great, and the fact that I can have this tomato not crack and split on me is pretty amazing. Really very good. And what kind of person would I be if I didn't give my best friend Dale a taste test? Now these tomatoes right here are for my best buddy. Hey Dale, come. These are for you. No, wait, come on. Over here, up, up. Come on, buddy. There you go. There you go, these are for you. You need some help there, buddy? They're pretty high up. Here you go. Oh, there you go. That's much easier. That was too much work for you. What do you think of that one, buddy? Was that one pretty good? Must be good because you want this next one. Is that one better or worse? Oh, you probably think this one's the best one. Ooh, that one's the acidic one, buddy. I hope you like that, buddy. Thank you. So everybody, thank you so much for watching today's video. If you found it helpful, please make sure to hit the like button, and if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe for future updates and more videos like these. If you're curious about any of the products that I use in my garden, they are all linked in my Amazon storefront down in the video description. Thank you all again so much for watching, and both Dale and I hope that we will see all of you again on the next video.